My landlord thought they could terrorize me into moving out, so I made sure they lost everything they owned instead. When I moved into the apartment on Maple Street, Richard seemed like the perfect landlord. He smiled during the walkthrough, promised quick repairs, and only asked for first month's rent, no security deposit. "I believe in trusting people," he said, shaking my hand. I should have known better. The problem started small. My heat would mysteriously stop working during the coldest nights. The hot water would cut out mid-shower. I'd call Richard, and he'd promise to send someone first thing tomorrow. Tomorrow never came. By month 3, I realized it wasn't negligence. It was strategy. Richard owned 12 buildings in the neighborhood. The city was rezoning the area for luxury condos, and longtime tenants with cheap rent were standing in his way. He couldn't legally evict us, so he was making our lives miserable instead. The harassment escalated quickly. Late-night inspections where he'd pound on doors. Contractors showing up at 6 a.m. to fix imaginary problems. And the worst part, he'd bring potential buyers through without notice, describing how much better the place would look once we got these outdated units. I started documenting everything. Photos of the cold apartment thermometer reading 47 degrees. Videos of brown water pouring from my faucet. Audio recordings of his 3 a.m. phone calls claiming emergency repairs. When I researched tenant rights, I discovered Richard had been pulling this same scam for years. Families had been forced out. Elderly tenants had moved to nursing homes. Young professionals had broken leases and lost deposits. But Richard made one crucial mistake. He assumed I was just another broke college student who'd fold under pressure. I wasn't. I was a journalism major with investigative skills and nothing to lose. First, I contacted every displaced former tenant I could find. Turned out, Richard had been using the same playbook for 5 years. We had dozens of witnesses and hundreds of violations. Next, I called the city's housing inspector. Officially, my complaints would take months to process. But when I mentioned I was working on an exposé about slumlords and corrupt landlords, suddenly my case became priority. The inspection revealed 53 code violations across Richard's properties. Faulty wiring, illegal entry practices, habitability issues he deliberately created. While Richard was dealing with the city, I reached out to his mortgage companies. Public records showed he was leveraging properties against each other in a house of cards. I sent them photos of the violations, along with evidence that he was deliberately damaging his own investments. 3 banks called their loans simultaneously, but the final blow came when I discovered Richard's biggest secret. He'd been advertising our building as luxury student housing and charging new tenants double what we paid for the same apartments he was trying to force us out of. I sent everything to the local news. The story ran during prime time. Landlord's illegal eviction scheme exposed. They interviewed displaced family, showed footage of Richard screaming at tenants, and revealed his financial house of cards collapsing. By morning, Richard had lost 6 properties to foreclosure, faced criminal charges for tenant harassment, and watched his properties part. The city seized his rooms and converted them affordable. I still live on May. My heat works perfect. Richard now rents an apartment.